Whalefall, Gone and Forgotten. Episode 6, Cave Whispers.
Oh, kid. Oh my god, can we slow down? I'm not in the right shoes for this.
You invited yourself along.
Yeah, but when you said you were going into town, this isn't what I thought you meant. I was expecting to, give you a tour or something.
We're still within city limits, so technically we are going into town. It's just the part without all the people and buildings.
Okay, but why? There are, plenty of places back on the main island to get covered in mud. And aren't you, scared out here? It's getting dark, and there was a murder not too long ago.
Why else do you think we're here?
You're not one of those true crime fans that try to visit people's graves, right?
I prefer to keep my grave visiting history to myself, thank you. And if you're going to keep asking questions, you can call me an investigative journalist or whatever makes you feel better. We're here anyway, so just stand over there and let me work.
Okay. How do you know we're in the right spot?
Well, there's the caution tape on the ground and in those trees, so that's a pretty good indicator.
Oh.
And there's the smell.
What?
There's this kind of, like a deep and warm but slightly sweet smell in the air. Not quite rot, but mostly there. A little ozone-y, too. Places like this always smell off. You learn to recognize it.
Places like this? Recognize it? What are you talking about? Wait, no, don't go poking around in there. What if they're still investigating?
Becky, the marking tape is clearly trampled into the mud. There's no officers to question us. There's no information for them to find out here that wasn't contaminated by the elements.
Then why are we here?
Because I'm looking for things the police are not aware of.
What exactly?
Certain spore patterns, dead animals, all sorts of... Becky?
Yeah?
What's my foot on right now?
It looks like a manila folder.
And to your knowledge, was this folder there a few seconds ago?
No.
Wonderful. I have been caving for most of my life. My mother lived for it, so as soon as I was old enough, I was spending vacations and holidays crawling through tunnels right alongside her. I know I complained a lot about it at first, like all kids do about outdoor activities, but over time it started to grow into a genuine passion. So when I was offered a cave tour guide position over in Tennessee, I jumped at the chance. Pretty soon I was spending all of my time below ground, crawling through squeezes and swimming through flooded tunnels, marveling at Mother Nature's handiwork. You'd think I'd start yearning for sunlight and warm air with a job like that, and sometimes after a tough day I did, but most of the time I was just happy to avoid the sweltering heat and sunburns of summer. The trade-off was plenty of scrapes and bruises, and once a nasty sprained ankle when I slipped on some algae. The thing about giving a cave tour, though, is that over time, that cave starts to lose its magic. You know all the places to duck and crawl and where not to go alone. So, when I had a day off and found myself itching for a good crawl, I'd go to a different cave system and descend without a trail of 8th graders or tourists with me. This particular cave, one nicknamed the Devil's Bowels for its twists and turns, was a favorite of my mother's. She loved the way you would have to turn around to get through the rock. She said it made her feel young and spry, even though she would always spend the afternoon nursing sore muscles. Ever since she passed last spring, I'd made it a point to go there whenever I could. So on a day just like any other, I hopped in the car and made my way to the Devil's Bowels. The cave itself wasn't a difficult climb. I came up on the opening on the hill, set my anchor, and lowered myself down. The entry hall, as my mother called it, was one of the most picturesque places in the world to me. It had ivy and vines growing along the walls and ceiling, light filtered through nearby trees, catching the dust in the air and coming down into the cave in brilliant beams. It felt like a place outside of time, somewhere fantastical. Once I sat down, I always stopped in there to stare. After a few minutes, I headed towards the tunnel that led further down. Like I said before, this cave is called the Bowels for a reason. The deeper I went, the more the tunnel curved and twisted. I had the whole place memorized, every bend in the rock and every foothold. Eventually I was on my hands and knees, then upright again, then hunched and scrambling over rocks. There was a rhythm to it all, and up and down and around and up again. It was calming, paired with the quiet, which was why the new tunnel was such a shock to me. I rounded a corner, fully expecting the usual left hook that would begin the way back up. I had been down there for maybe an hour and a half, and thought maybe I was just getting tired, but no. There was, without a doubt, a second tunnel that hooked right. I know for a fact that the tunnel wasn't on any maps. I'd committed them to memory and carried one in my bag just in case. I even checked forums and caving blogs for new systems and caverns. This tunnel was in none of them. It was not supposed to be there. I walked further, barely having to stoop, until I came out on the other side. My headlamp bounced light around the room. The walls were glittering with stones I'd never seen before, making the entire cavern appear like one massive geode. The space was impossibly large, with ceilings so tall my light barely reached even halfway up, which was also impossible. There was no way I was that far below ground. The way there didn't even slope much, and yet I turned in a circle in a room with glittering crystal walls, with a ceiling so tall I couldn't see the end of it. The floor was a smooth expanse of the same crystal, polished to a mirror shine. I could see my reflection in it as if it was standing water, and my lamp blinding me whenever I looked down. I walked further into the chamber, trying to find another opening in the wall or anything that would provide me with some information. At the very center of the space was a shape. As I drew closer, I realized it was an animal, or at least the body of one. It was all bones, so I'm not sure exactly what kind of animal it was, but I believe it was some sort of dog. It seemed to be erupting out of the stone floor, with its hind legs still partially below the surface. When I looked closer, it became clear to me that it was not just bone, but it too was covered in that strange stone. It shone like opal. That's the only stone I know of that can do that to a bone, and judging by the position the creature was in, it almost looked as though it had been alive when the transformation process began. I wasn't sure what to make the dog-like thing before me, but after a few moments I elected to do the likely stupid thing and touch it. I expected cold stone or smooth bone. Instead, it felt warm, almost soft, but still unyielding. It reminded me of the toys I had as a kid. It even made the same hollow plastic sound when I tapped it with my nail. It was with a start that I realized it was plastic, not stone at all. I will never be completely certain, but it is my belief that the entire cavern was made of plastic. I made it out of the cave just fine. I found my way out as soon as I exited the plastic room, all of the tunnels and corners once again becoming familiar. As I got further and further away, I began to feel a tugging in my mind, as if I'd forgotten something. I kept getting that urge to turn back all the way back through the cave and all the drive home. I checked my bag and in my car, nothing was missing. I did my best to ignore it, to focus on other things, but even at work, crawling in another cave, the feeling only grew. I lasted about a week. I know it was stupid. My mother taught me better. Hell, even work taught me better. But I couldn't keep pushing the feeling down. It was like a string snapped. In the middle of the night, I got in my car and started driving back to the park. I could feel my foot pressing down on the pedal further and further, as if my speed could help get rid of that strange desperation. In the moment, strapping on my gear and walking back towards the cave. I couldn't even begin to register how reckless I was being. How terribly stupid it was to go to a cave in the middle of the night, telling no one my plans or even that I'd left the house. I knew the usual entrance would have security and cameras, so I switched on my headlamp and I started walking deeper into the surrounding woods. Many years ago, my mother and I had gone on a tour of the Devil's Bowels that included an alternative entrance. It was small and narrow, twisting around until it opened up into the main entry hall of the cave. Once again, I stopped to stare at all of its splendor. By the moonlight, it was even more wonderful. I could almost hear my mother's voice whispering in the dark, marveling at its beauty. I crawled into the winding passages, taking the familiar route I'd taken 1,000 times before, more by muscle memory than by conscious thought. It was like an invisible string was tied to my chest, pulling me forward to the point of stumbling. I climbed up and down and around and dropped to my knees and stood up again until finally, I made it to the tunnel. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even stop once, just kept going and going and going. Surely the tunnel wasn't this long the first time, but maybe it was. I kept forward, eventually dropping to my hands and knees again. I knew it had to be wrong. The tunnel before was plenty tall enough for me. I never had to crawl like this, and yet I couldn't stop. That invisible thread yanked me down still. It was like crawling down a sharp incline, my weight moving me onward before my hands could make the motions to carry me down. It was a lone tunnel, a straight shot downward with no offshoots. My headlamp shone down the path ahead, and it was like staring into a pit. My helmet was starting to feel heavy, keeping my neck craned at such an angle to see ahead of me. I don't know when the tunnel started shrinking. Soon enough, I felt every stone scrape against me as I pressed on. That deep-seated need to keep moving only kept growing, my chest clenching with it. I had to keep going, keep crawling, had to find what it was that I had lost in the caves. It was like a whisper behind my ear, telling me what I needed, but too soft to hear with any clarity. I just kept going and going and going. My headlamp ran out of battery, but I didn't care. I could still hear it, a low whisper, a voice along my neck like a stray breeze. It was a quiet mumble of words, definitely words that I could not parse. I followed them, right and then left, up and down and down and down. I knew that voice. I knew it like my own. I knew it over lunch and tea and on the phone and in my mind as I am told again how much I sound like her. I longed to hear it clearly, to hear her gentle voice say my name again, to laugh along with her and marvel at how similar our laughter sounds. I wanted to see her, to feel the warmth of her hands again, not the cold, stiff corpse in a coffin. They put her in gloves to hide how gnarled her hands had been from a life of caving. It didn't suit her. Mother never wore gloves, never did her nails. She climbed and crawled and nursed scrapes and bruises. She was entirely lost below in life. Of course she'd be here, in a cave with me now. I just had to find her, to follow her voice just a little further, a little deeper. I could feel her nearby. I could feel her hand on my shoulders. It pushed me onward, deeper into the tunnel. I was crawling on my stomach, but I didn't care. The press of her hands, my mother's hands on my shoulder, my back, on my head, my arms, my ribs, her loving embrace. It was all I wanted. So much so that the walls took bits of me as I pressed on. There was no light, but I didn't need it. I could feel my wetsuit growing damp from the scrapes on my shoulder, my ribs, all of me. The bleeding was staunched by the hands pressing into my body. I could feel them gripping every inch of me, and only then did I realize I was no longer moving. There was nowhere to move to. Hands pressed against my face, cold and seeking and slick with my blood. I knew they were not my mother's hands, as they were smooth and fine-boned, like something just born, not cracked and calloused. I wanted to scream, but the hands would find the opening and reach into me, pull me apart, toss my remains aside. The air was pushed from my lungs. I could feel fingers digging in between my ribs. In all my terror, my trembling, my deep-seated grief, that voice still called out to me. I knew it wasn't my mother. I knew I wouldn't find her buried in these tunnels. My body wanted to move, to strain against the hands binding me, but I couldn't move an inch. All I wanted to do was lie there on my stomach, bleeding, weeping, listening to my dead mother's voice and the burn of my skin. I don't know how long I was down there for. I don't know when exactly the pressure let up, when it was just rocks again instead of hands. I opened my eyes for all the good I thought it would do in the dark, and was startled to see light. It was a literal light at the end of the tunnel. Ignoring the pain in my joints, I pushed myself forward. I could feel air, fresh air, blowing gently on my face, drying down the tears on my cheeks. Finally, I pushed through the cavern, sucking in air and holding my aching ribs. There is a phenomena where air travels through rocks in just the right way, making it sound almost like a human voice. That is not what this was. The cavern I'd spilled into was vast. Sunlight spilled in from above, the open maw of the cave lined with drooping vines and moss. How was it day? A slope of rocks below allowed for an easy exit, a place to climb up and out if I could just get there. Between me and the exit, suspended above the ground at varying heights, were the bodies of animals. Except they weren't just hung there. Each form, because that is more accurate than body, was a broken, twisted thing made of too many limbs and heads and mouths and eyes. Skulls stripped of flesh were sewn into the torsos of other creatures. Limbs were never in the right place. Arms came from backs and knees and hips and necks. Mouths gaped open like fish seeking water, each one crammed to bursting with teeth that looked far too human. Limbs and bones and sinew were sewn together with metal and rope, cables and thread. Rebar was bent into giant staples to hold the head of a moose on a cougar's body. A bear's torso had been hollowed out, and the cavity had been filled with writhing snakes, held in place with chicken wire and copper tubing. None of the bodies were still. None of them were silent. I don't know how they made those sounds without lungs or windpipes or vocal cords, but dear God, they gave it their all. One of them had, I think it was the body of a pig, but without the head. I couldn't be sure. It was wriggling in its spines, which I think were rubber-coated chains, and it made this god-awful sound. It was like air being squeezed from an organ that should not have air in it. Then it seemed to gasp and wheeze and suck in air again, over and over, until it held very, very still. With what had to be considerable effort, it began to speak. I couldn't help it. I screamed. As soon as my mother's voice came sputtering and gargling out of that thing, I broke into a sprint towards the exit, wailing all the way. I tried to skirt the edge of the cave, but the light barely seemed to reach that far, my headlamp long dead. I couldn't look back, but I could hear them moving behind me, clambering over each other, spinning on their suspensions. They seemed to move slowly, their limbs jerking and splaying wide, unused to doing anything but twitch and gasp in their misery. Still, as I tried desperately to dodge their swinging hands and claws, I felt them strike me over and over. It was like blunt force that took out chunks, flesh and hair and cloth being yanked away as I hauled myself onto the rocks. The creatures began shrieking, trying to grab onto my legs, but not finding the right way to move their hands. One of them, managed to grab my ankle and drag me down on the rocks. I could hear a click, 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 like something winding up, and then my ankle shattered in the grip of something with no head and too many teeth. That was the last thing I remembered before blacking out on the rocks. According to the authorities who found me 5 feet below the exit, my injuries were similar to that of a severe car crash, with crush injuries and friction burns. My ankle was not salvageable, practically turned to gravel, and the infection resulted in my losing the foot along with it. The rest of my body, the doctors say, was pocked with what they believed to be small stones shoved violently into my skin, but turned out to be small pieces of plastic. When they described the plastic to me in an attempt to find out what they were, they told me the bits had an interesting shine to them, almost like opal. Well, okay then. Final comments. Caves are the domain of the woods, so what's with the plastic? Oh, attached to this file is what looks like a medical report for a Lisa Cash, 37 years old, from a hospital in Tennessee. She was admitted to their ICU and, never left. She had what appeared to be an incredibly aggressive, previously undiagnosed bone cancer, citing numerous stony growths that have metastasized throughout the body. She passed away a week after being admitted to the ICU, having been in an induced coma for 3 days. She was buried next to her mother, Elise, in her hometown. End final comments.
Okay. So you're here to look into the weird murder with the gross holes in the body, and you talk into that.
Tape recorders aren't that outdated. It still works, and I don't have to worry about sudden data corruption as much. It's the most modern recording device my mother will use.
Oh my god, really? So do you guys, not have cell phones or computers or anything?
I have a computer and a cell phone, but I don't really use them much.
Okay, I'm absolutely going to need your number later, but anyway, you record on these tapes and send them back to your family?
Yes, at the end of the week I send back all of my tapes. All of them are made in copies of 2, both properly cased and dated. One of them sent to my family in Philadelphia, the other stays here for my personal notes. What happens to them after that? I don't know. My brother probably listens to them.
Ooh, a brother? What's he like?
Henricus. He's a stuffed shirt prick and our mother's favorite. What do you think he's like?
Isn't he going to hear that?
He knows my opinions of him.
And what about that thing you read? What was that about?
I don't know. But I'm going to find out, especially after finding 2 in one day. After I get access to the body, though. I should be able to get in sometime in the next week if my contacts are telling the truth.
Oh, do you need to get to the morgue? I can get you in there.
What? Whalefall, Gone and Forgotten, Episode 6, Cave Whispers, was written, edited, and produced by me. Hi, I'm Kat Duncan. Good to see you. Yeah, I did the normal things. You come to expect that by now. All of the things. I was Ophelia and Becky. Got to see more of Becky. That was once again voiced by Chimera the Kid. All of their socials and everything like that can be found in the description below. Yeah, there's a Patreon now, which will also be listed below. There's some different tiers that'll have some different goodies. If you want to check those out, the levels are, I think it's $5, $10, and $15. Okay, thanks. I love you. Bye.